The plane was cruising at 30,000 feet, the hum of the engines almost soothing as passengers settled into their seats. For most, it was just another routine flight. But for Lily, a young flight attendant who had spent years working her way up the ranks, it was just another chance to prove she was ready for bigger things. She kept a polite smile on her face as she walked down the narrow aisle, offering drinks and snacks to the passengers. It was during the beverage service when the situation began to unravel. Jason Montgomery sat near the back of the cabin, his face partially obscured by a baseball cap and sunglasses, a relaxed, unassuming man, at least, that's what Lily thought. He wasn't one of those demanding passengers, he hadn't made a scene when the flight was delayed, and he hadn't complained about the snacks being out of stock. But something was off about him. He hadn't taken off his sunglasses, and the way he was staring out of the window seemed distracted. "Excuse me, sir, could you please lower your sunglasses?" Lily asked, her tone polite but firm. Jason glanced at her, his dark eyes hidden behind the lenses, but he didn't respond right away. He didn't seem aggressive, but there was an unmistakable aura of indifference. Lily, thinking he hadn't heard her, repeated the request. "Sir, you need to take those off, please." "It's a safety protocol," she said, her voice carrying a hint of impatience. Still, Jason didn't respond. He simply continued staring out of the window, almost as though he hadn't heard her. It was a small thing, but something about the defiance, the way he ignored her, felt like a challenge. Lily's hands tightened around the cart, her smile fading. She was trained to keep control in situations like this, but something in her gut told her this wasn't just a minor issue. Maybe it was the way his calmness seemed to mock her authority. Maybe it was her own personal history of having to fight for respect, fight for her place in the world. Whatever it was, it struck a nerve. Lily took a step closer to him. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you again to remove your sunglasses," she said, her tone cold and firm. Her job was important to her, and she had to make sure the rules were followed. If she let this slide, what kind of message would that send? Jason finally turned to face her, his expression unreadable. He didn't say anything, but his silence spoke volumes. To Lily, it felt like he was dismissing her entirely. The air between them seemed to thicken, her frustration building in her chest. "Sir," she snapped, her voice rising slightly. "I'm going to have to report you to the captain if you refuse to comply." A few people in the surrounding seats began to stir, sensing the tension building. Jason looked at her for a long moment, almost as if he were deciding whether to respond or not. Finally, he spoke, but his words were clipped, indifferent. "I'm not taking them off," he said simply. Lily's heart raced. Was he testing her? Did he think she would back down? Without thinking, she reached forward and, before she even realized what she was doing, slapped him across the face. The sound of the impact seemed to echo throughout the cabin, and for a moment, everything was still. She froze, her hand still hanging in the air. Jason's face hadn't changed, but the color drained from Lily's cheeks. She had crossed a line, one she couldn't take back. The passengers around them were now all watching, some with shock on their faces, others with disbelief. "Did you just," Jason began, but before he could finish his sentence, Lily quickly stepped back, her pulse pounding in her ears. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean. I didn't think," Lily stammered, trying to recover from her impulsive action. But Jason didn't respond. He simply stood up slowly, his calm demeanor unshaken by the slap. He adjusted his sunglasses and started making his way down the aisle, his movements deliberate. Lily watched him leave, her breath caught in her throat. What had she done? The rest of the cabin remained eerily quiet. It was as if the passengers were waiting for something to happen, for some kind of resolution. But Lily couldn't focus on them. She was too consumed by the terrible mistake she had just made. She had slapped a passenger, one who had done nothing wrong, one she had misjudged entirely. When the flight landed, Lily could feel the weight of her actions settling in. The plane taxied to the gate, and she followed the passengers off the plane in a daze, her thoughts a swirl of regret. Her colleagues gave her questioning looks, but she didn't have the words to explain. Not yet. As the flight crew filed out, the airline's CEO, Richard Mitchell, who was on board for the flight, stood in the terminal. He was a tall, imposing man, known for his no-nonsense attitude. Lily's stomach dropped when she saw him. This couldn't be good. Lily's knees felt weak as she approached him, her mind racing to come up with an explanation that would somehow make this whole mess better. "Lily, what happened?" Richard asked, his voice calm but filled with a tension she couldn't ignore. I made a mistake," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to." Before she could finish, Richard's phone rang, and he quickly answered it, his expression turning serious. Lily stood there, waiting, feeling the seconds stretch into what seemed like an eternity. Richard hung up the phone, his eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. "Lily, I need you to listen carefully," he said. "The man you slapped, his name is Jason Montgomery. He's the owner of this plane. And he's also the one who funds a significant portion of our operations." Lily's breath caught in her throat. Jason Montgomery? The owner? The billionaire? She hadn't even realized. She had slapped a man with far more power than she could have imagined. Her mind went blank. She had no idea how to fix this, how to salvage the situation. The CEO's voice cut through her thoughts, his words laced with disappointment. "You've made a huge mistake, Lily. And I'll be having a conversation with him soon. But for now, I suggest you think about how you plan to make things right." Lily stood frozen, her hands shaking. How could she have known? How could she have known that the man she had just humiliated was the one who owned everything around her? Her heart pounded in her chest as the gravity of her actions sank in. She had crossed a line she couldn't erase, and now she was going to have to face the consequences. The story was only beginning, and she had no idea how deep this mistake would cut, or how much it would change her life. What happens next? Lily thought, the question lingering in her mind as she stood in front of the man who could make or break her career with a single word. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Jason Montgomery stared out the window of his private jet, watching the sprawling city below as the plane soared through the clouds. To an outsider, he might have seemed like just another wealthy man on a business trip, but Jason was much more than that. He wasn't the type to flaunt his wealth. In fact, he preferred to stay under the radar. The sunglasses he wore weren't to hide his identity, they were a shield, a way to avoid the incessant, often demeaning, attention that came with being one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the country. Jason had grown up in a small, run-down neighborhood, a far cry from the lavish lifestyle he now led. His family had struggled to make ends meet, and though he loved his parents, there had always been a sense of inadequacy hanging over him. As a young boy, he would walk past houses he couldn't afford to look at, watching kids in designer clothes, wondering what it would be like to not have to worry about where your next meal would come from. He wasn't bitter about it, he used that pain as fuel, turning it into a relentless drive to change his life. His journey had started in the most unlikely of places, a humble tech startup that he had invested in with the last of his savings. The company, a small idea that had barely gained traction, would go on to revolutionize the way people interacted with technology. In less than 5 years, Jason's initial investment grew into a multi-billion-dollar empire. But success didn't come without a price. Jason had learned quickly that the more wealth he accumulated, the more isolated he became. People weren't interested in who he was as a person. They saw the money, the status, and the power. They wanted a piece of that. It didn't matter how much good he did with his wealth, donating to charities, funding startups, and advocating for underrepresented communities, people only saw a man with money, not a man with a story. He had never quite gotten over that feeling. It wasn't that he hated the wealth or the attention, he had learned to appreciate the luxury it afforded him. It was the way it changed how people treated him. They didn't see Jason Montgomery as a person, they saw a product, a symbol of success they either wanted to be near or tear down. They didn't ask about his dreams, his fears, his past, they just saw a walking dollar sign. Jason had been taught to be strong, to be stoic in the face of adversity. His mother, a nurse, had always told him that his worth wasn't in how much money he made, but in the difference he could make in the world. Yet, the more he succeeded, the more difficult it became to hold on to that belief. He tried to live a quiet life. He bought a few properties, homes and places where he could escape the pressures of the public eye. But the isolation was suffocating. He had no one to truly connect with, no one who saw him as more than his achievements. The more Jason withdrew into his private world, the more his personal relationships suffered. Even his family, while proud of his success, didn't understand the weight he carried every day. Jason had dated, but it was always the same, women who were more interested in his bank account than his heart. Friends came and went, some sticking around for the perks of his wealth, others only seeking his influence to further their own careers. The idea of having a real, honest relationship with anyone seemed increasingly out of reach. Then there were the times he felt like he was living in a constant state of performative success. Everyone around him expected him to keep pushing, to keep achieving, to keep being the person who had it all. He had become the face of a lifestyle, a model for those who wanted to climb the same ladder. But no one saw the exhaustion behind his polished exterior. On the day of the flight, Jason was tired. He'd been traveling non-stop for weeks, juggling business meetings, charity events, and family obligations. All he wanted was some peace and quiet, a few hours of solitude to escape the demands of his life. He was headed to a meeting with some potential investors, but the thought of facing more people drained him. He just wanted to sit in his seat, put on his sunglasses, and fade into the background. He hadn't expected anything unusual on this flight. The plane was one of his private jets, a symbol of his success, but it was also a sanctuary for him. He liked it that way, quiet, private, away from the crowds. He didn't care much for the airline staff, as long as they did their job. He didn't expect them to treat him any differently, even if he was the one who owned the plane. But what happened next took him completely by surprise. As soon as the flight attendant, Lily, approached, Jason could feel her eyes on him. There was something about her that unsettled him. It wasn't the usual sense of entitlement he'd grown accustomed to from the other flight attendants, nor was it the kind of passive indifference that he often encountered. Lily seemed different. It was clear she had a need to assert authority, and he could sense that she was trying to establish control over him in a way that didn't sit well with him. When she asked him to remove his sunglasses, he initially ignored her. Not out of disrespect, but because he didn't want to deal with any unnecessary confrontation. It was a simple request, but his gut told him that if he complied, he'd only be feeding into a situation that could become more complicated than it needed to be. He didn't need to be lectured by someone he didn't know. The sunglasses stayed on. But the moment she raised her voice, something inside him clicked. He had lived his life fighting for respect, for the space to be himself without constantly being judged or categorized. And here was a young woman, in a uniform, who thought she could dictate who he was based on the simple fact that he was seated in a first-class cabin. In that moment, he wasn't the billionaire, he was just a man trying to have a peaceful flight, and her insistence rubbed him the wrong way. When she slapped him, it wasn't just the physical sting that caught him off guard, it was the rush of anger that boiled up in him. This was the kind of treatment he had come to expect from people who saw him as a walking checkbook, not as a person with feelings. His reaction wasn't one of rage, but of disbelief. For the briefest moment, he wanted to lash out, to remind her who he was, but instead, he did nothing. He simply stood up, adjusted his sunglasses, and walked away, choosing silence over confrontation. As he made his way down the aisle, he couldn't help but think about the layers of complexity that this situation had brought to light. Lily had no idea who he was, but that didn't make the slap any less painful. In a strange way, it mirrored all the misunderstandings and misjudgments he had faced throughout his life. People often assumed they knew him because of his success, but in truth, no one truly understood who he was or what he had been through. Jason didn't want to make a scene. He could have easily demanded an apology, but part of him wondered if it was better to just let it go. He had learned that power and money didn't always bring happiness, and sometimes, they only made things more complicated. As the plane touched down, he knew that the incident wouldn't just be forgotten. He could already hear the whispers of the passengers, the shock in their voices. They had seen something unfold before their eyes that would be difficult to ignore. It was a moment that would linger, one that would change everything for both him and Lily. He didn't know yet how it would all play out, but he could feel the storm brewing. And in that moment, Jason Montgomery, self-made billionaire, quiet philanthropist, and deeply misunderstood man, knew that his life was about to take an unexpected turn. But he had no idea just how much it would change him. The aftermath of the incident lingered in the air like a storm cloud that refused to dissipate. Lily couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change, though she had no idea how, or to what extent. As she walked through the terminal, her mind raced, trying to process the gravity of what had just happened. Slapping a passenger wasn't just an error in judgment, it was a career-ending mistake. She could already imagine the headlines, "Flight attendant slaps billionaire passenger." The thought made her stomach churn. What had she been thinking? Lily had always prided herself on being professional, on following the rules, and maintaining control. But something about Jason Montgomery's indifference had triggered something deep inside her, a need to prove herself, to assert her authority in a world that often overlooked her. She'd been just another flight attendant, another face in the crowd, until Jason had dismissed her with a glance. And in that moment, something inside her had snapped. Now, standing at the gate, Lily tried to steady her breathing. She couldn't afford to panic. There was still hope, wasn't there? Maybe it wasn't as bad as she thought. Maybe Jason would let it go. But deep down, she knew that wasn't likely. Jason Montgomery wasn't just any passenger. He was one of the most powerful men in the country, and he didn't get to that level by letting things slide. She could only imagine how he would respond and the airline's top brass found out. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden tap on her shoulder. She turned around to see her manager, Carol, standing behind her, her face a mask of concern. "Lily, we need to talk," Carol said, her voice low. Lily nodded, her heart sinking. This was it. The moment of reckoning. The two of them walked to the staff lounge, a small, sterile room that smelled faintly of coffee and cleaning supplies. Carol closed the door behind them and leaned against it, crossing her arms. She didn't speak right away, her eyes scanning Lily's face as if trying to gauge how much of the situation she truly understood. "Lily, I don't know what happened back there, but I just got off the phone with the CEO of the airline," Carol said, her voice tight with barely contained frustration. "Do you know who that man was?" Lily nodded, her throat dry. "Jason Montgomery," she whispered, the name like a weight in her chest. She could already see the headlines in her mind, "Billionaire slapped by flight attendant." "That's right," Carol said, her tone icy. "He owns the plane you were working on. And if that wasn't bad enough, he's one of our biggest investors. You slapped him, Lily. You embarrassed him in front of the entire cabin." Lily closed her eyes, the shame flooding her all over again. She had been so focused on asserting her authority, on not letting him walk all over her, that she hadn't stopped to think about the consequences. Jason Montgomery wasn't just a random passenger, he was the reason the airline had the resources to operate. And she had slapped him. Carol sighed, walking over to the small table where a stack of paperwork sat. "Listen, I don't know how this is going to play out, but I need you to understand the severity of this situation. You don't get to make decisions like that on your own. You don't have the luxury of acting out of anger. You're a professional, Lily. Your job is to remain calm and follow protocol, even when it's tough. Lily nodded, her chest tightening as Carol's words hit home. She had failed, and now, it seemed, there was no way to undo the damage. Richard Mitchell, the CEO, is going to meet with Jason Montgomery, and from what I understand, Jason's not happy, Carol continued. This isn't just about you anymore. It's about the airline's reputation. We can't afford to alienate someone with that kind of influence. If Jason decides to pull his investment, we're looking at major financial fallout. Lily felt her knees go weak. She had been a part of the airline for 5 years, but she'd never imagined that her actions could have such far-reaching consequences. She had always believed that her job was important, but this felt like a nightmare. What's going to happen to me? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Carol's expression softened, but only for a moment. I don't know. But we need to act quickly. The airline's legal team is already involved. You may be facing suspension, or worse, termination. We're in damage control mode now, Lily. Lily felt the blood drain from her face. She had no idea how to fix this. How could she? She couldn't undo the slap. She couldn't take back her anger or her rash actions. What should I do? She asked, her voice trembling. Apologize. Immediately, Carol said, her tone firm. You need to reach out to Jason Montgomery, apologize for what happened, and hope that he's willing to let it go. You're not going to get anywhere if you just sit around waiting for this to blow over. You have to take responsibility for your actions, no matter how uncomfortable it is. Lily nodded numbly, her hands shaking as she fumbled with her phone. She had no idea how to approach someone like Jason Montgomery. What could she possibly say to a man who had the power to change her entire life with a single phone call? Carol gave her a long look before leaving the room. I'll give you a little time to think this through. But remember, Lily, this is your last chance. Don't mess it up. The door clicked shut behind Carol, and Lily was left alone with her thoughts. The weight of the situation pressed down on her like a heavy blanket. Every part of her wanted to run, to avoid the confrontation, to pretend like it had never happened. But she knew better. The damage was done. And now, she had to fix it. Jason Montgomery was a man who had everything. He didn't need her apology, not really. He could have anyone he wanted, do anything he wanted. So why would he care about a flight attendant's apology? What could a simple apology do to erase the humiliation she had caused? Lily stared at her phone, the screen lighting up her face. Her fingers hovered over the keys, unsure of what to say. The thought of making contact with Jason felt impossible, but it was the only option she had left. I'm sorry, she typed, then deleted the words. It didn't seem like enough. After a few long minutes, Lily typed out a message that felt a little more honest, a little more personal. Mr. Montgomery, I want to sincerely apologize for my actions on the flight today. I was out of line, and I deeply regret the way I behaved. You didn't deserve that. I understand the consequences of my actions, and I am truly sorry for any distress I may have caused you. I hope you will consider hearing me out. Sincerely, Lily. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close. But it was all she could do. Lily hit send. Lily's heart raced as she stared at the screen of her phone. She had hit send on the message, and now all she could do was wait. Time seemed to stretch into eternity as she paced the small staff lounge, occasionally glancing at the phone in her hand. Every buzz, every notification felt like an eternity. But no reply came. The silence was deafening. Minutes turned into hours, and still, there was no word from Jason Montgomery. It was almost as if the entire universe had decided to stop for a moment, holding its breath in anticipation of what would come next. Lily couldn't even concentrate enough to think clearly. She just kept replaying the scene in her head, the slap, the shock on Jason's face, his icy calm as he walked away. What if he never responded? What if he never forgave her? She had no idea what would happen next, but she knew one thing: everything had changed. By the time she had boarded her next flight, her phone was still silent. The airline had placed her on a short layover, and she was now getting ready for another round of flights, trying to push the whole incident out of her mind. She didn't know how much longer she could keep her composure, knowing that every moment could be the one when everything came crashing down around her. Lily's shift was a blur. She moved through the cabin with the practiced efficiency of a professional, but her mind was miles away. Every time she looked up, she half expected to see Jason walking down the aisle, his gaze locked onto hers with cold disdain. She could feel the eyes of the other passengers on her, as if they all knew what had happened, and maybe they did. There was no escaping it. No way to ignore the reality that she had crossed a line, and now, she had to face the consequences. It wasn't until the end of her shift, when she was ready to head back to the staff lounge, that she received a notification. It wasn't from the airline or her manager. It was from Jason Montgomery. Lily froze. She couldn't believe it. Her hands shook as she opened the message. Ms. Turner, I received your apology. While I don't condone your actions, I understand that people make mistakes. However, I must tell you that your behavior was not only disrespectful but also dangerous. A flight attendant has a responsibility to ensure the safety and comfort of the passengers. What you did today was not just a breach of etiquette, it was a violation of that duty. I'm willing to overlook this incident, but I expect professionalism from now on. The message was short, but it carried a weight that made Lily's breath catch in her throat. She had expected something more final, something colder, but this? This was different. Jason Montgomery had the power to crush her career in an instant, and yet, he was giving her a chance. A chance to prove that she was more than her mistake. The relief that flooded through her was almost overwhelming. She sat down in the nearest chair, trying to steady herself. The words on the screen blurred as her tears welled up. This wasn't just about an apology anymore. This was about redemption, about finding a way to make things right. But she knew she couldn't just accept the second chance and move on. This was a pivotal moment in her life. She had to prove that she could rise above her impulsive actions. Jason's forgiveness didn't come without expectations. Lily wasn't naive. She understood that the situation was far from over. Jason had shown a sliver of grace, but that didn't mean he was going to forget what had happened. She had to work even harder now, not just for the airline, but for herself. She needed to reflect on her actions and figure out how to grow from this experience. The first step was recognizing why she had let her emotions control her in the first place. Why had she felt the need to prove herself to Jason, a stranger, on a flight? Why had she felt so compelled to exert control over him when he hadn't asked for it? The flight had been chaotic, yes, but she couldn't ignore the underlying tension that had built up inside her for months. Lily had been pushing herself too hard, juggling a demanding job, personal issues, and a world that seemed determined to tell her who she was supposed to be. She had allowed the pressures of her life to overwhelm her, and in that moment, on the plane, she had lashed out. But Jason's message had given her something she hadn't expected: hope. He hadn't given her a free pass. He hadn't excused her behavior. But he had given her a chance to make things right. And that meant everything. As Lily closed her eyes for a brief moment, she could almost hear the conversation she had with her best friend, Marissa, just a week ago. You need to let go of the idea that you have to prove something to everyone, Marissa had told her. You can't keep trying to be perfect all the time. You're allowed to make mistakes. What matters is what you do after. The advice had stuck with Lily, even though she hadn't fully embraced it at the time. Maybe this was the lesson she needed to learn: to stop trying so hard to control everything, to stop hiding behind the mask of perfection. It was time to step into her own truth and face the consequences of her actions. Lily stood up and took a deep breath. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in a while, she felt a sense of purpose. She wasn't just going to apologize for her actions. She was going to show Jason, and herself, that she could be better. The road ahead would be difficult, but Lily knew this was the moment that could define her future. She had been given a second chance. And she wasn't going to waste it. Lily's phone buzzed again, this time with a call from Carol. Her pulse quickened. There was no telling what this conversation would bring. Carol had been the one to deliver the initial news of Jason's anger, and now, she was the one Lily had to answer to. It was her bridge to the company, and her heart raced with the pressure of what might come next. Lily, I just got word from corporate, Carol's voice crackled through the phone. Jason Montgomery reached out to us, personally. And, well, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The CEO isn't happy. There's a lot of tension surrounding the situation right now. I don't know if you're aware, but Montgomery doesn't just own the plane you were working on. He owns a considerable portion of the airline itself. And with the company being in the middle of some major negotiations right now, he's holding a lot of influence. Lily's stomach dropped. She had known that Jason was important, had known he could make or break careers, but hearing the weight of it from Carol made the reality hit like a ton of bricks. I get it, Lily said quietly, trying to keep her voice steady. I've made a huge mistake. I never meant to cause any trouble for the airline. But what can I do now? There was a long pause before Carol spoke again, her voice gentler now. Jason's not as upset as we thought, though. Apparently, he's willing to let it go, but on one condition. Lily felt a flicker of hope rise in her chest, but it was quickly followed by a gnawing sense of dread. One condition. What did that even mean? What condition? Lily asked, her voice trembling with anticipation. You need to meet him in person. He wants to see you. Face to face. He wants to hear you out, apologize properly, and most importantly, show that you understand the gravity of what you did. Lily felt a wave of relief mixed with disbelief. Jason Montgomery, who could have had her fired or worse, was willing to give her a chance to redeem herself. But the idea of facing him again, after everything that had happened, made her feel like she was walking into the lion's den. Could she really convince him to see her as more than a flight attendant who had messed up? I'll do whatever it takes, she said, her voice firm despite the churning uncertainty inside her. Good, Carol replied. Jason's assistant will be in touch to set up a meeting time. Be prepared. He's not just going to let this go easily. But if you handle it well, you could keep your job, and more importantly, you might be able to salvage your reputation. Lily let out a shaky breath. She knew this was her one shot, her last chance to make things right. If she could somehow convince Jason that she was more than just a mistake, more than just that impulsive moment on the plane, maybe she could walk away from this with her career intact, and maybe even learn something about herself along the way. 2 days later, Lily found herself standing in front of an imposing building in downtown New York City. The sleek, glass structure gleamed in the late afternoon sun, a testament to Jason Montgomery's wealth and power. Her palms were sweaty, her heart hammering in her chest as she stared at the massive building. She had no idea what to expect from this meeting. Would Jason yell at her? Would he fire her on the spot? Or would he do something even worse, completely ignore her, dismiss her as insignificant? All she knew was that she couldn't afford to walk in there unprepared. This was her moment to prove that she wasn't just a screw-up, that she had learned from her mistakes and could rise above them. Lily took a deep breath and walked through the glass doors. The lobby was pristine, filled with towering plants and polished floors. She was escorted to an elevator that led up to the top floor, and soon she was ushered into a spacious office with walls of glass and sleek, modern furniture. Jason Montgomery sat behind a massive desk, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp and calculating as they fixed on her the moment she stepped into the room. He was exactly as she remembered, immaculate, powerful, intimidating. But there was something else in his gaze this time. It wasn't anger. It wasn't disdain. It was curiosity. "Miss Turner," Jason said, his voice low, yet not unkind. "I trust you know why you're here." Lily nodded, her throat dry. "Yes, Mr. Montgomery. I want to start by apologizing for my actions. What I did was inexcusable. I let my emotions get the best of me, and I made a terrible mistake. I'm truly sorry for the disrespect I showed you, and for the embarrassment I caused to both you and the airline." Jason didn't speak right away. He just watched her, his expression unreadable. Lily fought the urge to fidget under his gaze. The silence seemed to stretch for eternity before Jason finally leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Tell me, Lily," he said, his voice still calm but with an edge to it. "What exactly did you think you were accomplishing when you slapped me?" Lily's stomach tightened. She wasn't sure what he wanted her to say. Was he testing her? Or was he genuinely curious about her reasons? I was trying to assert myself," Lily said slowly, choosing her words carefully. "I've spent years being overlooked, ignored. I've worked hard to prove my worth, and in that moment, I felt like I had to do something to show I wasn't just a flight attendant who would take whatever was thrown at her. But I was wrong. I let my pride take over, and I acted impulsively." Jason raised an eyebrow, leaning forward slightly. "So, you were trying to assert control over me?" Lily nodded. "Yes. I thought I could regain some sense of power in that moment. But I see now that it was a foolish, misguided thing to do." Jason sat back, his fingers tapping lightly on the desk. "It's good that you can admit it. Not everyone would." There was another long silence before Jason spoke again, his tone softer now, but no less authoritative. "You've made a mistake, Lily. But I'm willing to give you the chance to learn from it. This isn't the end of the road for you, but it will be if you can't demonstrate that you've learned and that you're capable of handling yourself with professionalism in the future." Lily felt a mixture of relief and guilt. He was giving her a second chance. But was she ready for it? Could she really prove to him, and to herself, that she could handle the responsibility that came with it? "I won't let you down," Lily said, her voice steady but filled with determination. "I will work harder, be more professional, and prove that I can rise above this. I know I made a huge mistake, and I will do everything I can to make it right." Jason studied her for a moment longer before nodding, as if he had made his decision. "I hope you do, Lily. I really do." Lily stood there, a sense of finality in the air. The conversation had taken a turn she hadn't expected, but it was the beginning of something new. She had no idea what the future would hold, but one thing was clear: she wasn't going to give up. Not now, not ever. For the first time in days, she felt a spark of hope. She had been given a second chance. And she was going to fight for it. Lily stood at the edge of her apartment's balcony, her gaze lost in the city lights below. The world seemed to move in a blur around her, but her thoughts were elsewhere, still replaying the conversation with Jason Montgomery. The weight of his words had settled heavily in her chest, and for the first time in days, she could hear her own heartbeat. It was louder now, thudding in her ears with an intensity that matched her anxiety. She had expected Jason to be cold, maybe even ruthless. After all, he was a billionaire, the kind of man who held all the power, the kind of man who didn't have to give second chances. Yet, he had. And that made everything feel more complicated. His forgiveness wasn't the kind you could just accept and move on from. No, it came with a challenge. With expectations. Jason Montgomery had given her a shot, an opportunity to prove herself, and it wasn't something she could take lightly. He didn't want just an apology. He wanted more. He wanted her to prove that she could handle the responsibility of representing not just the airline, but herself. She wasn't just an employee anymore. In his eyes, she was a reflection of the airline's standards, its reputation. And that realization hit her like a freight train. She wasn't just trying to save her job anymore, she was trying to redefine herself. Lily let out a deep breath, her fingers curling tightly around the railing. It was time to stop playing small. To stop pretending that she could get by just by doing the bare minimum. She needed to show Jason, and herself, that she could be more than that moment of weakness on the plane. That she could rise to the occasion, meet the demands that life was placing on her, and prove that she was capable of handling it all with grace and professionalism. But how? Her mind raced with possibilities, but everything felt overwhelming. She had always been a hard worker, but now, there was a new layer of pressure. There was an audience. There was Jason Montgomery, watching her every move, his eyes on her every step. She wasn't just a flight attendant now, she was a person under a microscope, judged by every decision she made. The phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Carol. "Lily, just wanted to let you know that Jason has requested you for his upcoming flight. We're setting up a meeting to discuss your next steps. Be ready. This could be your opportunity to show him how much you've learned from the incident." Lily felt her stomach twist. The next steps? Was this it? Was this her moment? She had no choice but to take it head on. She had no idea what to expect from this meeting with Jason, but she knew one thing for sure, she wasn't going to let him down. The morning of the flight arrived quicker than she expected. Lily barely slept the night before, tossing and turning, running over everything she could possibly say to Jason. How could she convince him that she was worthy of this second chance? How could she prove that the slap on the plane was a moment of weakness, not a reflection of who she truly was? When she arrived at the airport, the usual hum of the terminals felt different. She felt more focused, more determined than she ever had before. She had a mission now, a purpose. She wasn't just going through the motions anymore. She had to show Jason that she was more than the girl who made a mistake. The flight was smooth, the passengers calm, but Lily couldn't shake the feeling that everything in her life had changed. Every smile she gave, every interaction she had with the passengers, felt heavier now. She was performing under a spotlight that she hadn't known existed before. Every move she made mattered more than ever. And in the back of her mind, she knew Jason was watching. When the plane finally landed, Lily's legs felt like jelly as she followed the crew into the private lounge. Jason was already there, sitting casually, his eyes scanning through a set of papers. He glanced up when he saw her enter, and for a moment, their eyes locked. His expression was unreadable, his gaze sharp. Lily took a deep breath and walked up to him. This was it. This was the moment she'd been waiting for. "Mr. Montgomery," she said, her voice steady, though she could feel the butterflies fluttering in her stomach. "Thank you for giving me the chance to meet with you again." Jason nodded, his fingers tapping lightly on the table in front of him. "I said I'd give you a chance, Lily. But now it's up to you to prove that you're worth it." The weight of his words sank in, but she refused to back down. She had made mistakes. She knew that. But she wasn't going to let them define her. She was going to take responsibility, move forward, and show him that she could do better. "I understand," she said, meeting his gaze with newfound determination. "I've had time to think about my actions, and I want you to know that I've learned from it. I let my emotions get the best of me, and I've realized that, as a flight attendant, I represent more than just myself. I represent the airline. I represent professionalism. And I failed in that moment. But I'm committed to doing better, and I'm ready to prove that to you." Jason leaned back in his chair, studying her for a long moment. The silence stretched between them, thick with tension. But Lily held her ground. She wasn't going to break now. Finally, Jason spoke. You've got guts, I'll give you that. But guts alone aren't enough to succeed in this business. You have to earn respect. You have to show up every day with a clear head, with humility, and with the knowledge that the smallest mistake could cost you everything. Lily nodded, the sting of his words not lost on her. She wasn't just here for another apology. She was here to prove she had learned the most valuable lesson of all, the difference between confidence and arrogance. I won't let you down, she said again, her voice softer but no less resolute. I've learned that, sometimes, the hardest thing to do is admit when you're wrong. But that's what I'm doing now. I'm owning my mistake, and I'm going to make sure it doesn't define me. Jason's expression softened ever so slightly, though his eyes remained sharp. You've got a long road ahead of you, Lily. But if you're serious about this, I'll be watching. Don't make me regret my decision to give you another chance. Lily's heart raced, but she stood a little taller. I won't. As she turned to leave, she could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, but she also felt something else, hope. It wasn't the kind of hope that came from being handed a free pass. No, this was the kind of hope that came from knowing she had been given an opportunity to rewrite her story. And she wasn't going to let it slip away. This was her chance for redemption. And she was going to take it, one step at a time. The days following her meeting with Jason Montgomery were a whirlwind of emotions for Lily. It wasn't just the pressure of having to prove herself again, but the weight of what that really meant for her. The airline's reputation rested not only on Jason's favor but now on her shoulders as well. She felt like she had been given a fragile opportunity, an opportunity she couldn't afford to squander. As she prepared for the next flight, every action felt more calculated than ever before. She found herself overthinking every word, every gesture, making sure she didn't appear anything less than the polished professional Jason had hoped she would become. But the more she tried to perfect herself in his eyes, the more the anxiety gnawed at her. Could she really live up to the expectations placed on her? Could she prove that she wasn't just a flight attendant who made a mistake, but a woman capable of growth and redemption? The morning of her next flight arrived quickly, and Lily's nerves were palpable as she checked in with the crew. They had been briefed about the new level of scrutiny she was under, which added another layer of tension to the already high-pressure environment. "Hey, you're doing great," one of her fellow flight attendants, Rachel, reassured her as they prepared for boarding. "I can see how hard you're trying, and that's what matters. Just keep doing your best." Lily smiled at Rachel's encouragement, but the self-doubt still lingered. She didn't feel like she was doing enough. Not yet. Not until she had proven herself to Jason, not just to him, but to everyone who had witnessed her fall from grace. As passengers started to board, Lily's eyes flickered across the cabin, instinctively searching for the familiar, imposing figure of Jason Montgomery. The moment her gaze landed on him, she felt her breath catch in her throat. He was seated in first class, his eyes focused on a tablet, his posture exuding an air of quiet authority. It was clear he had no intention of making things easy for her. She was still thinking about how to approach him when a sudden, unexpected voice cut through her thoughts. "Lily, we need to talk." Lily's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't Jason who had spoken, but the head flight attendant, Amanda. She had a reputation for being meticulous, demanding, and unforgiving when it came to performance. "I've heard about your situation," Amanda continued, her eyes narrowing slightly. "And I want to make one thing clear. The crew is already nervous about you. They've been talking, and I don't want any more distractions. If you're going to be on this flight, you need to prove you can handle it, no exceptions." Lily's throat tightened, and she nodded quickly. "I understand. I'm doing my best." "That's the thing, Lily," Amanda said, her tone softening just a little. "Your best isn't enough yet. Not with someone like Jason Montgomery on board. You need to show that you've learned from this. No one's going to take you seriously unless you can show you've changed. And that means you need to show up. Not just in your uniform, but in your attitude, in how you carry yourself." Lily swallowed hard, the pressure building in her chest. She hadn't realized just how many people were watching her, waiting to see if she would fail. It wasn't just Jason now, it was the entire crew, the passengers, the eyes of the airline, all waiting for her to either rise to the occasion or crumble under the weight of it all. Amanda's words stung, but they were a wake-up call. Lily had never wanted to be someone who let the expectations of others dictate her worth, but now, it felt impossible to escape it. She had to prove herself to everyone, Jason, the crew, and herself. "I will," Lily said, trying to mask the storm of emotions inside her. "I'll do better. I won't let you down." Amanda gave a curt nod. "Good. I'll be watching." As the cabin doors closed and the plane began taxiing, Lily's mind raced. She glanced back at Jason Montgomery, who had taken his seat in first class without so much as a glance in her direction. It made her feel insignificant, like a speck of dust on a polished surface. He wasn't interested in her apology anymore. That moment was gone. Now, he was waiting to see if she could meet his expectations. And the crew? They were watching her too, waiting for her to falter. Every step she took was under scrutiny. Every choice she made would be examined, analyzed, and judged. The weight of their eyes felt suffocating, but there was no way out. She had to rise. The flight itself was uneventful, at least on the surface. Lily moved through the motions with as much professionalism as she could muster, ensuring the passengers were comfortable, making polite conversation, and keeping things running smoothly. But every time she passed by Jason's seat, her heart would thud harder in her chest. The pressure was like a heavy weight on her shoulders, and she couldn't shake the feeling that if she made even the smallest mistake, it would be the end of everything. At one point, during the mid-flight meal service, Lily approached Jason's seat with a tray of food. She took a steadying breath before offering him the meal, trying not to let the tension show in her hands. "Mr. Montgomery," she said, her voice polite but still carrying the weight of her nerves. "Your meal for today's flight." Jason barely looked up from his tablet as he nodded in acknowledgement. "Thank you." Lily held her breath for a moment before she stepped away, feeling the burn of disappointment in her chest. It wasn't the confrontation she had hoped for, but maybe that was for the best. She had to prove herself not through words, but through actions. She couldn't afford to expect anything more than what she had already been given, her chance. The rest was up to her. The flight finally landed, and as the crew went through the usual post-flight routine, Lily couldn't help but notice the subtle shift in the atmosphere. There was no immediate applause or congratulatory remarks. There was no praise for her improvement or her ability to keep everything running smoothly under pressure. But there wasn't anything negative either. No reprimands, no sighs of frustration from Amanda or anyone else. And that, in a strange way, was the victory. Lily had survived the flight, had managed to meet the expectations set before her without slipping up. But as she headed into the break room, her phone buzzed again, another message from Carol. Lily hesitated before opening it. "Jason wants to meet with you again. He's impressed with your progress on today's flight. This could be your moment to solidify your future with the company. Be prepared." Lily's stomach clenched with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The challenge was far from over. Jason had seen something in her, something she hadn't realized was there. But this meeting could be the one that determined everything, whether she would prove herself worthy of a second chance or whether the pressure would break her. As she read Carol's message again, she realized that the real work was just beginning. The next steps could be the hardest of all, but Lily wasn't backing down now. She was ready. And she would prove it. Lily's palms were slick with sweat as she walked down the hallway towards the private lounge where Jason Montgomery had asked to meet her. She had received Carol's message earlier that morning, and though the words, "impressed with your progress," lingered in her mind, they didn't do much to calm her nerves. This was it. Her next chance to prove that she wasn't the flight attendant who slapped a passenger in frustration, but a professional capable of more. Much more. She felt the weight of the company's expectations on her shoulders, but today, it was the expectations of one man that terrified her the most. Jason Montgomery had already given her a second chance, but this meeting would decide if she was truly worthy of it. She couldn't afford to let him down. Not this time. As Lily reached the door to the lounge, she took a deep breath, steadying her nerves before entering. Inside, Jason was sitting by the window, the skyline of the city casting a golden glow over the room. He was wearing a tailored suit, his posture impeccable as always. He didn't look up when she entered, but there was something different in his demeanor. A tension in the air, as if he was waiting for her to prove something. Lily swallowed her anxiety and stepped forward, her voice calm and controlled. "Mr. Montgomery, thank you for meeting with me." Jason finally looked up, his eyes sharp, scanning her face as if trying to gauge her every emotion. His expression was unreadable, but Lily couldn't help but notice the faint flicker of approval that passed through his eyes. Was he impressed? Or was this simply a final test? She couldn't tell. "Lily," he said, his voice low but firm. "Let's get straight to the point. I've been keeping an eye on your progress over the last few weeks. I've seen some improvement, and I'll admit, I'm surprised. But the question is, do you think you're ready to take the next step?" The pressure in the room felt almost suffocating, but Lily stood taller. "Yes, I believe I'm ready." Jason tilted his head, studying her with a look that made her feel as if he were peering straight through her. "You've worked hard to get to this point, I'll give you that. But this isn't just about doing your job well. This is about leadership. The ability to rise above any situation, to handle the pressures that come with it, and to set the standard for everyone around you." Lily nodded, her hands still trembling at her sides, but she refused to let him see her doubt. She had made it this far, she couldn't back down now. "I understand," she said, her voice steady. "I know this isn't just about doing my job. It's about showing that I can lead, not just follow." Jason's lips twitched into the faintest of smiles. "Good. That's exactly what I want to hear." The words felt like a weight had been lifted off her chest, but the relief was fleeting. Jason's smile faded as quickly as it had appeared, and the room was filled with the kind of silence that made Lily's heart pound in her ears. "But there's more to it than that," he continued, his tone turning more serious. "There's a new opportunity coming up, and it's one I'm considering you for. I can't give you details yet, but it would require a level of trust, a level of commitment to the company and to your team. This is bigger than what you've done so far. This is about proving that you can be a leader in ways that go beyond your individual performance." Lily's mind raced. This was the moment she had been waiting for. She could feel it, the chance to change the course of her life, to leave behind the past mistakes and show that she had the potential to rise above it all. But with that opportunity came an immense pressure, one she wasn't sure she was entirely prepared for. "You're giving me a chance?" she asked, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. Jason's gaze locked with hers, and for the first time in this conversation, she saw a flicker of something, recognition, maybe even respect. "I'm giving you the chance to prove that you can handle what's next. But understand this, Lily, if you fail, it won't just be your job on the line. It'll be your future in this industry. People will remember your mistakes. This will be your final test." Lily felt a chill run down her spine. This was no longer just about making things right with him or even the company. It was about reshaping her future, proving that she had the strength to handle the pressure and rise to the occasion, no matter how high the stakes were. "I understand," she said, her voice firm. "And I won't let you down." Jason studied her for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was almost contemplative. "I hope you mean that. I really do." He paused, and Lily's breath caught in her throat. What was coming next? Was he going to offer her the opportunity, or would she be dismissed as just another disappointment? Then, finally, Jason spoke. There's an executive team meeting in a few days. I want you to be there. It's going to be a test of your ability to handle pressure, to think on your feet, and to contribute meaningfully to a high-stakes environment. You'll be working with some of the best people in the business. And if you prove yourself there, I'll consider offering you a permanent position within the management team. But like I said, this is your last chance. Lily's heart skipped a beat. She had heard him correctly, hadn't she? He wanted her to be part of the executive team. She would be working with top-level professionals, proving herself in a boardroom full of sharp minds, and possibly solidifying her place in the future of the airline. It was everything she had ever wanted. It was the chance to prove herself not just to Jason, but to the world. I won't disappoint you, she said again, her voice filled with conviction. I'll be ready. Jason gave a small nod, his eyes narrowing slightly. I'm counting on it. This is more than just a job for you now, Lily. This is your chance to prove that you belong in this world. Don't waste it. With those words, he stood up and extended his hand. Good luck. Lily took a deep breath before shaking his hand firmly. For the first time in weeks, she felt a surge of confidence, an energy coursing through her veins that made everything feel possible. She wasn't just the girl who made a mistake anymore. She was someone on the verge of a breakthrough. As she left the lounge, her mind was racing. The weight of what was at stake hadn't fully hit her yet, but it would. In just a few days, everything would change. She was going to step into the boardroom with the executives, alongside people who had the power to shape her future. And there, she would prove that she was more than her past mistakes. She would show them all who Lily Jackson truly was. But as she stepped into the bustling hallway of the airport terminal, she couldn't shake the thought of what Jason had said, don't waste it. This was her moment. And she was going to make it count. Lily's heart pounded in her chest as she entered the high-rise conference room where the executive meeting was scheduled. It felt like the room was swallowing her whole. Glass walls surrounded the space, giving her a panoramic view of the city below, but the skyline felt distant and irrelevant in that moment. The towering buildings outside paled in comparison to the towering expectations inside this room. The air was thick with professionalism and power. The executives were already seated at the long, polished table, their expressions ranging from neutral to expectant. As Lily walked in, their gazes followed her, a silent evaluation taking place with each step she took. They weren't just assessing her performance, they were sizing her up as if she were already part of their ranks, their scrutiny as cold and precise as the glass windows. At the head of the table was Jason Montgomery, who, as always, exuded an air of control. He had an authoritative presence, and when his eyes landed on Lily, she felt the full weight of his judgment. It wasn't the cold, distant gaze she had become accustomed to, though. No, this was different. He was watching her as someone who had a stake in her future. Lily's nerves kicked into overdrive as she took her seat at the far end of the table. This was her chance. Her chance to prove to Jason, to these powerful executives, and to herself that she could be more than just a flight attendant, she could be a leader, an integral part of the company. The meeting began, with executives discussing routine matters, but Lily barely registered their words. She was too focused on the fact that Jason had placed her in this room. She had been brought here for one reason, to prove she was capable of more. But that weight, the pressure to perform, felt suffocating. Time seemed to stretch as the discussion progressed. Lily forced herself to stay present, to listen and contribute when necessary, but her mind kept spiraling. Every word she spoke felt like it was being dissected by Jason and the others. Was she saying the right things? Was she impressing them or embarrassing herself? Then, the moment arrived. Jason looked at her, a slight shift in his expression signaling that it was time for her to step up. Lily, he said, his voice carrying across the room. You've been here for a while now. I want to know, what's your vision for this airline? Where do you see us going, and how do you think we can get there? Her breath hitched. This was the moment where everything could change. The executives were all looking at her, waiting for her to answer. Her mind raced, her heart thundering in her chest. She had to say the right thing. She had to speak with confidence and purpose. She closed her eyes for a brief second, trying to quiet the chaos in her mind. Then, she opened them, looking directly at Jason. I believe we have a unique opportunity to redefine what it means to provide service in the sky, Lily began, her voice steady. We're not just offering transportation, we're offering experiences, moments of connection, comfort, and care. If we can focus on creating that experience for each and every passenger, from the moment they step onto the plane until the moment they step off, we'll not only improve our customer satisfaction, but we'll build loyalty in a way that's unparalleled in the industry. She felt her confidence growing as she spoke, the words flowing more easily now. It's about anticipating needs before they arise, offering personal touches that make our passengers feel seen and valued. It's about building relationships with them, making them feel like they're more than just a number on a boarding pass. If we can do that, we'll differentiate ourselves from every other airline. We won't just be a place to travel, we'll be a place to belong. Lily paused, realizing she had spoken with more passion than she'd intended. The silence in the room was deafening. She couldn't tell if they were impressed or simply taking her words in, but she wasn't finished yet. And beyond that, I believe in empowering the team on the ground and in the air. Our crew members are the ones who create those experiences. If we invest in them, provide them with the tools and support they need, we'll have a motivated, engaged workforce that will deliver exceptional service every time. That's how we'll build loyalty, not just from passengers, but from our own employees. Lily looked around the table, meeting the eyes of each executive. Her heart still raced, but the tension had shifted. She could feel it. The words had left her mouth, and they had made an impact. The executives were no longer just evaluating her, they were listening. Jason was silent for a moment, his gaze steady as he considered her response. The room seemed to hold its breath as everyone waited for his reaction. Finally, he spoke, his voice measured. I have to say, Lily, I'm impressed. You've clearly put thought into this. You're right. It's not just about providing a service, it's about creating an experience. And the idea of empowering the crew is something I haven't heard put so clearly before. You've shown that you have a vision for what this company can become. And that's exactly what we need. Lily's heart soared at his words, but she quickly reminded herself that this wasn't over. She couldn't let the moment of praise distract her from the bigger picture. Jason turned his attention to the other executives. What do you think? He asked, his tone inviting their feedback. There was a brief silence before one of the senior executives, Mark, spoke up. I agree with Jason. Lily, you've shown initiative here, and you've demonstrated a clear understanding of our brand and what we stand for. I think we could use more people like you on the team, people who think beyond the usual metrics and are willing to put the customer experience first. Another executive, Amanda, added, I've seen your improvement on the ground, Lily. Your professionalism, your ability to handle tough situations, it shows. I think you're ready for more responsibility. Lily's breath caught in her throat. The validation was overwhelming. For so long, she had felt like the one person in the room who didn't belong, the one person who had made a fatal mistake and couldn't overcome it. But now, here she was, standing at the forefront of the company's future. Jason looked back at her, his expression serious but approving. You've earned your place here, Lily. But this is just the beginning. You have a lot to prove, and you'll need to continue showing that you can handle the pressure and lead this team forward. But today, I think we've seen that you have what it takes. Lily smiled, her heart swelling with pride. The journey had been long, filled with doubts and setbacks, but she had finally reached this point. She wasn't just the flight attendant who slapped a passenger, she was a leader, someone capable of shaping the future of the company. As the meeting continued, Lily felt a sense of calm wash over her. She had done it. She had proven herself. And now, with the support of Jason and the team, she was ready for whatever came next. The emotional highs of the day, the recognition, and the promise of something greater made it all feel worth it. She had come full circle, and now, she was ready to face the next challenge, whatever it might be. But deep down, Lily knew one thing for certain: she wasn't going to waste this opportunity. Not for anything. The next few days passed in a blur. Lily's head was spinning from the whirlwind of meetings, the hours spent perfecting presentations, and the overwhelming sense of responsibility she was suddenly shouldering. The opportunity Jason had given her was a dream, but now, it felt more like a high-stakes game. One wrong move, and everything could come crashing down. In between preparing for her new role, Lily couldn't stop thinking about what Jason had said at the meeting: "You've earned your place here, but this is just the beginning." It was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it was a validation of everything she'd worked for. But on the other, it felt like a challenge, a reminder that she was still being watched, still being tested. As the days passed, Lily began to notice the subtle undercurrents in the office. There were whispers in the hallways, hushed conversations that stopped when she entered the room. The seasoned executives, who had once barely acknowledged her presence, now seemed to regard her with a kind of skepticism. Some were supportive, but others? They made no effort to hide their doubts. Lily couldn't shake the feeling that her every move was being scrutinized. And the pressure, once manageable, was starting to feel unbearable. One afternoon, as Lily was walking down the corridor, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, and a message from Carol popped up: "There's a meeting tomorrow. You'll be leading the presentation on customer satisfaction metrics. Make sure you're ready." Lily's heart skipped a beat. Leading the presentation? She had never been in charge of something so important. She had only just begun proving herself, and now, she was expected to take the reins of something that could potentially make or break her credibility. Her first instinct was to panic, but she quickly forced herself to take a deep breath. She had done this before, just not on this scale. She had been a flight attendant, speaking to hundreds of passengers daily, managing complex situations. But this? This was different. This was a room full of people who could change the course of her career with a single decision. Lily spent the entire evening reviewing data, making notes, and rehearsing her speech. She practiced in front of the mirror, trying to convince herself that she could do this. But no matter how many times she went through the slides, a gnawing feeling of doubt lingered in the back of her mind. The next morning, Lily stood in front of the conference room, her heart thumping in her chest. The executives were already seated, their expressions neutral, and Jason sat at the head of the table, watching her with an unreadable look. She took a steadying breath before stepping forward, projecting as much confidence as she could muster. "Good morning, everyone. Today, we'll be discussing our customer satisfaction metrics for the last quarter, the areas where we've seen improvement, and the steps we plan to take moving forward." As Lily began the presentation, her nerves seemed to settle, replaced by a laser focus on the task at hand. She explained the numbers, showed the trends, and highlighted the team's achievements. But as she moved through the slides, she couldn't ignore the quiet murmurs from the back of the room. The whispers, the sideways glances, they were like a silent judgment she couldn't escape. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Then, just as she was presenting the final analysis, a voice interrupted her. It was Mark, the senior executive who had seemed supportive at the meeting but now looked less than impressed. "I don't understand," he said, his voice sharp. "You're saying that customer satisfaction has improved, but the numbers don't reflect the same kind of growth. In fact, they're stagnant. How can we trust your analysis when it doesn't align with the data?" Lily's breath caught in her throat. She had been so sure of her presentation, confident that the numbers backed her claims. But now, she was being questioned. Challenged. I disagree," she began, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to sound composed. The data shows incremental improvement, but I agree that we need to focus on more consistent growth moving forward. We've identified areas for enhancement, and we have plans in place to address them. The room was silent for a moment, but it was the kind of silence that felt like an accusation, not contemplation. She could feel the tension building, the weight of their skepticism heavy in the air. Jason remained silent, watching her closely. His gaze was piercing, making her feel exposed and vulnerable. She had hoped this presentation would solidify her position, but now, it felt like the entire room was questioning her ability. Mark, sensing her unease, pressed further. You talk about plans, but what concrete steps are you taking to ensure that the satisfaction numbers will improve? We've heard these promises before, and frankly, we need results. The questions came fast, and for a moment, Lily felt like she was drowning. Each answer she gave only seemed to raise more doubts, more skepticism. The feeling of being trapped in a game she wasn't fully prepared for settled over her like a storm cloud. Then, just as the tension reached its peak, Jason spoke, his voice calm but commanding. Enough. Lily looked up, relieved yet apprehensive. Jason's tone was one of authority, the kind that silenced even the most outspoken in the room. Everyone turned to him, and Lily waited, her pulse racing. What was he going to say? Was he about to throw her under the bus, too? Jason stood up and walked toward the whiteboard, where the charts from Lily's presentation were still displayed. He glanced at them for a moment before turning back to the room. I think what Lily is trying to say here is that we're making progress, but it's going to take time. You all want instant results, but real, sustainable growth takes careful planning and execution. We need to give our teams the tools they need to succeed. Lily's chest tightened with a mixture of relief and confusion. Jason had defended her, but his words felt like a reminder that she was still on trial. She wasn't sure whether to feel thankful or more uncertain than ever. As Jason continued, he added, Lily's insight into the customer experience has been invaluable. Yes, there are challenges. Yes, we need more consistency. But that's not a reason to dismiss progress. It's a reason to support her efforts and push for better results. We all need to be on the same page. With that, he turned back to Lily. His gaze softened just a fraction. You've got this, Lily. Keep going. His words were both a lifeline and a reminder that she was still being tested. This wasn't over. The stakes had just gotten higher. As the meeting ended, Lily walked out of the room feeling like she had survived the storm, but just barely. She was grateful for Jason's support, but the questions and the scrutiny would only intensify from here on out. Every step she took from now on would be watched, and one misstep could send her falling back into the abyss. She couldn't afford to fail. Not now. Not when she was so close to proving herself. And so, as the weight of the challenge pressed down on her, Lily knew one thing for certain, she would fight for this, no matter what. Because the future she dreamed of was just within reach. The days following the meeting were a blur of tension and doubt. Lily couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing on the edge of something monumental, but every step she took seemed like it could tip her into disaster. The pressure of proving herself was mounting, and the smallest mistake could undo everything. It wasn't just the executives who were watching her now. The entire team, from the flight crew to the office staff, was looking to her for leadership. She had started out as a flight attendant, someone whose job was to serve and follow orders. Now, she was supposed to be the one giving orders, making decisions, and leading a team toward a shared vision. The shift felt overwhelming, but Lily wasn't ready to back down. Jason had become both a mentor and a challenge. He seemed to know exactly how to push her, how to make her question her limits without ever giving her a clear answer about what he truly thought of her. His support was there when she needed it, but it was always coupled with an unspoken expectation that she would rise to the occasion. As the weeks went on, Lily found herself spending countless hours at the office, long after the other employees had gone home. Her mind was consumed with strategies, projections, and numbers. But with every late night, every email, every meeting, the pressure only increased. It was as though the harder she worked, the more the stakes seemed to rise. Then, one fateful morning, Lily received a message from Carol. The subject line was simple: emergency meeting. Her stomach dropped. An emergency? What could possibly be wrong now? She opened the email, reading through the words quickly. The meeting was scheduled for the following afternoon. It would be with Jason and the top-level executives. There was no mention of what the agenda would be, but the words urgent and critical were used enough to make her heart race. Lily spent the next few hours on edge, trying to prepare for whatever storm was coming her way. The time leading up to the meeting felt like a countdown to something she couldn't control. She checked and rechecked her reports, but everything seemed in order. She had done her job, so why did it feel like something was about to go horribly wrong? When the day of the meeting arrived, Lily arrived early, her mind spinning with all the possibilities. She sat at the conference table, staring at the empty chairs, imagining the executives' faces when they would walk in. The room felt suffocating, the anticipation almost unbearable. The door opened, and Jason entered first, followed by the other executives. The room fell silent as they took their seats. Jason's expression was serious, his demeanor not giving away anything. Lily tried to steady her nerves as she adjusted the papers in front of her, trying to look calm and collected. After a moment of silence, Jason spoke. "Lily," he began, his voice calm but laced with something deeper, something she couldn't quite place, "we've been tracking the progress of your initiatives. And while there has been some improvement in certain areas, I have to say, we're not seeing the kind of results we expected." Lily's heart skipped a beat. This was it, the moment she had feared. The moment where everything came crashing down. Her mind raced as she tried to understand what he was saying. Results? She had worked tirelessly to move things forward. What was missing? Jason continued, his eyes scanning the room. "We need more than incremental improvements. We need transformation. Our competitors are making big moves, and we're lagging behind. We've put a lot of faith in your ability to lead, but right now, we're not seeing the turnaround we need." The words hit Lily like a punch to the gut. She had given everything to this company. She had invested her time, her energy, and her soul into making things better. And now, it seemed like it wasn't enough. Before she could respond, Mark, the executive who had challenged her before, spoke up. "Jason's right. We need to see drastic change, and we need to see it fast. The market is shifting, and we're at risk of being left behind. You're in charge of customer experience, Lily. If we can't improve this aspect quickly, we're going to lose our competitive edge. This is bigger than just numbers, it's about survival." Lily's throat tightened, and she fought to keep her composure. They were right. The stakes had never been higher. But what could she do? She had already poured everything into this initiative, and now it felt like the walls were closing in. "I understand the urgency," Lily said, her voice steady despite the fear rising within her. "But we can't rush this. Real change takes time, and if we push too hard too quickly, we risk losing what we've already built. We need to build this transformation step by step." Jason leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "I understand that. But time is not on our side. We need results, and we need them now. I expect you to bring a new plan to the table, something that will shake up the industry. We can't afford to be cautious anymore." The room was heavy with tension as Lily absorbed his words. The pressure was unlike anything she had ever experienced. It wasn't just her career that was on the line anymore, it was the future of the airline itself. And then, it hit her. The answer she'd been searching for. The breakthrough she had been waiting for. What if they weren't thinking big enough? What if they were so focused on incremental change that they missed the opportunity for real disruption? Jason, Lily began, her voice gaining strength, I hear you. And I'm not suggesting we take things slowly. But what if we think bigger? What if we disrupt the industry not just with better service, but with a completely new approach to how we engage with passengers? She stood, her mind racing as she spoke. We've been focusing on customer satisfaction, yes. But what if we flip that? What if we create a community of loyal passengers who don't just fly with us because they have to, but because they want to be part of something? A loyalty program that goes beyond just points. A program that makes our passengers feel like they're part of a family, where they're involved in decision-making, where their opinions shape the direction of the airline. The room was silent for a moment as everyone processed her words. Jason's eyes narrowed, and she could see the wheels turning in his mind. This, Lily continued, is the disruption we need. We build not just an airline, but a movement. A brand that's about more than just flying. It's about creating experiences, relationships, and a sense of belonging. The silence stretched on, and Lily's heart raced in her chest. She had taken the leap. She had thrown everything she had into this idea, and now, it was up to Jason and the executives to decide if it was enough. Finally, Jason spoke. His voice was calm, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, something like respect. Lily, that's a bold vision. I think it's worth exploring. But this is just the beginning. You'll need to back this up with real strategies, and we'll need to see results soon. But for now, I'm willing to give you the space to develop it further. Lily's breath caught in her throat. She had done it. She had proposed something that could change the entire trajectory of the company. But the real work was just beginning. As the meeting ended, Lily felt a rush of adrenaline. She had faced the tipping point, and now, she was on the edge of something massive. This wasn't just a new plan, it was the start of a journey that would define her future. And she was ready. Lily stood in front of her office window, staring out at the bustling city below. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm orange glow over the skyline, but the beauty of the moment didn't reach her. Her mind was consumed with the task ahead. What Jason had said, bold vision, exploring further, backing up with real strategies, had left her in a state of both excitement and sheer panic. She was standing on the precipice, and the fall felt as real as the victory she had just tasted. The idea she had proposed, turning the airline into a movement rather than just a service, was a gamble. It was an idea so far removed from the corporate expectations of the industry, so risky, that if it failed, it would be her downfall. But if it worked, it could change everything. It could transform her career from an ambitious, overworked employee into the driving force behind one of the most innovative companies in the world. Lily turned away from the window, her breath shaky. You've got this, she repeated to herself. But doubt still gnawed at her insides. She had no idea where to start, no concrete roadmap to follow, only a vague sense that she had to create something truly revolutionary. That night, Lily barely slept. Her mind raced, pulling her in 1,000 directions. She needed to meet with the marketing team, brainstorm with customer service, come up with a loyalty program that felt personal and genuine. She needed to understand what customers really wanted, not just the satisfaction surveys, but the things they weren't saying, the emotions they felt when they thought about flying. Her phone buzzed around 4 a.m., jolting her from a restless slumber. She groggily checked the screen. It was a message from Jason. I need the preliminary proposal on my desk by tomorrow. Don't overthink it. Keep it focused on what makes us different. You can do this. Lily's stomach churned. She couldn't help but feel the weight of his words pressing on her chest. Don't overthink it. How could she not? This was the opportunity of a lifetime, and she had less than 24 hours to deliver a proposal that could either propel her forward or pull her under. She rubbed her temples and took a deep breath. One step at a time, she thought. Focus on the idea. Not the fear. The morning passed in a blur of phone calls, emails, and last-minute adjustments. Lily barely had time to eat, let alone process everything that was happening. By noon, she had a rough draft of her proposal, a concept of community-building initiatives, a new loyalty program, a focus on emotional connection over transactional interactions. It was everything she had imagined, but she knew it wasn't enough. It wasn't bold enough. Not yet. By the time Lily sat down in front of her computer, reviewing the draft for the last time, she felt drained, but a surge of determination pushed her forward. This is it. This is the idea that will change everything. She spent the next few hours refining every detail, smoothing over the language, making sure the statistics were rock solid, and ensuring the strategy was clear and actionable. She had to ensure that the risks Jason and the executives would take on this idea would feel calculated. It couldn't just be a dream, it had to be something that felt grounded in reality. Finally, as the clock ticked past 5 p.m., Lily hit send. The proposal was finished, and it was out of her hands. For a moment, she felt a strange combination of relief and terror. She leaned back in her chair, exhaustion settling in her bones. But as soon as she let her guard down, her phone rang. It was Jason. Her heart skipped a beat. This is it. The moment of truth. Lily, Jason's voice was calm, but there was a certain edge to it. I've just gone through your proposal. Anne. I have to say, I'm impressed. Relief washed over her, but she forced herself to keep her voice steady. Thank you. That means a lot coming from you. You've captured the essence of what we need, Jason continued. But there's one thing you need to understand. This isn't going to be easy. The risk you're taking is huge. There are a lot of people in this company who won't be on board, and there will be obstacles at every turn. You need to be ready for that. Lily swallowed hard. Obstacles. She had expected challenges, but the sheer weight of his words felt like a warning. Could she really do this? Was she ready to face the resistance she would inevitably encounter? Jason's voice softened. But that's what makes this such a game changer. If we succeed, we're not just creating a new program, we're changing the entire way this company is perceived. You're on the right track, but you need to think bigger. Make sure your vision stretches beyond just the program. Think about what the future of this airline could look like, what we can become. Lily's breath caught in her throat. I understand. I'll take your feedback, Anne. There's one more thing, Jason interjected. I'm giving you full control over this project. You'll lead the team, and I expect you to push the boundaries. But I'm also putting my trust in you. Don't let me down. Don't let me down. The words echoed in her mind as the call ended. The weight of Jason's trust felt both empowering and terrifying. She was no longer just an employee working her way up. She was now the leader of this monumental shift, responsible for the success or failure of an entire revolution in the company. But as the initial shock of Jason's words began to settle, something inside Lily clicked. She wasn't just going to meet the expectations set before her. She was going to exceed them. She was going to do what no one else thought possible, and she was going to make it work. With renewed determination, Lily pulled up her proposal one last time and made a few final edits. It was far from perfect, but it was hers. And in that moment, she knew one thing for sure, the future of the airline, and her career, was in her hands. The clock was ticking. And now, more than ever, Lily knew she was ready to fight for what she believed in. She had faced her doubts, and now she was going to rise to the challenge. The road ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain, Lily wasn't backing down. She was about to change everything. The following days were filled with an intensity that Lily had never experienced before. It was as though the weight of the entire company was now squarely on her shoulders. The feeling of responsibility was suffocating at times, but there was also a fire burning inside her. She had taken the leap, and there was no turning back. Her office became a war room. Meetings piled on top of meetings, with discussions about implementation, execution, and logistics. She needed to form a team, build out the vision, and convince every department that this new direction was not just a change, it was a revolution. Every time she thought she had everything under control, something new would emerge, throwing her back into the chaos of uncertainty. The executives had given her their approval, but that didn't mean they were completely on board with the idea. As the days went by, Lily could feel the resistance growing. Some of the senior leadership team didn't believe in the community-based vision she was pushing. They were too accustomed to the corporate, profit-driven mindset. They saw it as too risky, too idealistic. There were whispers in the hallways, whispers that made her feel isolated and small, despite the grand ambitions she had for the company. Her biggest obstacle came in the form of Mark. He had been quietly critical of her since the beginning. He was the one who had first raised concerns about her leadership potential, and he hadn't warmed up to her vision of transformation. Lily had tried to brush off his skepticism, but the longer it went on, the more it began to chip away at her confidence. One afternoon, after another grueling meeting, Mark cornered her in the hallway outside the conference room. "Lily," he said, his tone laced with an undercurrent of disdain. "I think you're missing something here. This community nonsense isn't what the company needs right now. We need a clear-cut plan to fix our numbers, not some fluffy idea about loyalty and connections. You're overestimating how much our customers care about being part of something." Lily felt her pulse quicken, but she kept her voice calm. "Mark, I respect your opinion, but you're looking at this from the wrong angle. This isn't about loyalty programs or points. It's about creating a brand that people are emotionally invested in. People want to feel like they matter, like they're part of something bigger. If we don't start focusing on that, we'll continue to fall behind." Mark shook his head, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. "You're playing with fire, Lily. This could blow up in your face, and when it does, don't say I didn't warn you." Lily's stomach churned, but she stood her ground. She couldn't afford to let Mark's doubts get to her. She had made it this far, and she wasn't about to back down now. "I'm not going to let fear control me. This is the future of the company. It's a risk, yes, but it's one we have to take." Mark's cold gaze held hers for a moment longer before he turned and walked away without another word. As his footsteps echoed down the hallway, Lily felt a bitter taste in her mouth. His words stung, but she wouldn't let him stop her. Not now. Not after everything she had put on the line. Over the next few weeks, Lily dove deeper into the logistics of her plan. She assembled a team of loyal colleagues who believed in her vision, even though many of them were just as nervous as she was about the unknown. They worked tirelessly, crafting a strategy that could potentially reshape the company's future. But the tension between Lily and Mark continued to escalate. The other executives, who had initially given her the green light, now seemed more divided. Some began questioning the practicality of her approach, voicing concerns about the long-term feasibility of her ideas. Others remained supportive, but Lily could feel the pressure mounting with every passing day. Jason, ever the enigma, remained largely silent. He hadn't intervened in the growing tension between Lily and Mark, and he hadn't offered much guidance as the project moved forward. His expectations were clear: you're in charge, you make it happen, but Lily began to wonder if that was all he was willing to offer. Was he testing her? Pushing her to her limits? The cracks began to show when Lily was invited to present her full proposal at a company-wide meeting. The stakes were higher than ever. If she could pull this off, she would have the full backing of the company behind her. But if her vision was torn apart, she knew it would be the end of her reign as the driving force behind the transformation. She had spent days preparing, perfecting every detail of her presentation. It was her best work, her passion, and her future, all wrapped into one. She had even practiced her speech in front of the mirror, trying to make sure she could convey both the excitement and the practicality of her vision. This was her chance to prove that she wasn't just a flight attendant anymore. She was a leader, a visionary. But as she stood in front of the crowded conference room, her nerves began to take hold. The sea of faces in front of her seemed like a blur, each one silently judging her every word. She caught Mark's eyes in the back of the room, and for a moment, his cold, critical expression made her want to turn and run. But then she thought of everything that had brought her here. The late nights, the sacrifices, the moments of doubt. She had worked too hard to back down now. Taking a deep breath, Lily began her presentation, her voice steady despite the anxiety twisting in her gut. She outlined her vision, her dream of creating a community-focused airline, a brand that would build deeper connections with passengers. She explained how this would not only transform the customer experience but also boost profitability in the long term. She presented the data, the case studies, and the projected results, all while pushing past the fear that threatened to choke her. For the most part, the room was quiet. People listened, nodded, and took notes. But there was one moment, one question, that sent a chill down her spine. After Lily finished her presentation, Mark stood up from the back of the room. "I'm sorry, but I just don't see how this will work in the real world," he said, his voice dripping with skepticism. "This community idea is nothing more than a marketing gimmick. It's not going to change the fact that we're losing customers because we can't compete on price and service." Lily's stomach twisted. She could feel the eyes of the entire room on her now, waiting for her response. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she forced herself to speak. "It's not a gimmick. It's a shift in how we see our customers, not as numbers, but as people. People who want to feel valued. If we can make that connection, we'll win their loyalty. We'll keep them coming back. It's not about being cheaper, it's about being better, more personal, and more human." Mark's eyes narrowed, but he didn't respond. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. Lily's pulse raced as she waited for someone, anyone, to back her up. But as the seconds ticked by, she felt the weight of the room shift, the tension thick in the air. This wasn't just a battle for the company's future. It was a battle for her career, her dreams. And it wasn't over yet. She had taken a risk, and now the consequences were unfolding before her. The tension in the boardroom lingered long after Mark's critical words hung in the air. Lily felt a knot tighten in her stomach, her heart pounding as she looked around the room, trying to gauge the reactions of her colleagues. For the first time, she doubted herself. Could she really make this work? Was she just chasing an impossible dream? For what felt like an eternity, no one spoke. The silence was suffocating, and the weight of Mark's harsh critique pressed down on her like an anchor. Lily opened her mouth to respond, but her voice caught in her throat. She had planned for this. She had anticipated the skepticism, but nothing could have prepared her for the crushing feeling of standing alone in front of her colleagues, fighting for something they didn't fully believe in. Finally, Jason, who had been quiet throughout the meeting, leaned forward in his seat. His piercing gaze locked with Lily's, and for a brief moment, she thought she saw a flicker of something, encouragement, maybe, or recognition of the battle she was facing. "Lily," he said, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "What Mark is suggesting may seem practical, but you're not in the business of doing what's easy. You're here because you see something others don't. Your vision is bold, and sometimes that means standing firm even when the world around you is uncertain." Lily blinked, the weight of Jason's words settling over her like a warm blanket. There was a comfort in his support, but it didn't take away the sting of Mark's skepticism. She took a deep breath and, for the first time in the meeting, allowed herself to relax, if only a little. "You're right," she said, her voice gaining strength. "We're not here to follow the status quo. We're here to challenge it. If we want to lead, we can't be afraid to take risks. Yes, there will be obstacles. But we have to look beyond the immediate results. The long-term impact of this shift is what will make us stand out in the market. Mark crossed his arms and looked at her with an almost smug expression. And what exactly are you proposing? That we throw away everything we've built just to cater to some emotional whims of our customers? Lily's eyes locked onto his, her mind racing for the perfect words. This was it, this was her moment to convince them all. She stepped forward, feeling the fire of her conviction surge inside her. No, she said firmly. I'm proposing that we build something more than just a service. I'm proposing that we build a brand that people can feel. That people can trust. Loyalty isn't just about rewards or points. It's about creating a sense of belonging. It's about showing our customers that we care, not just about their business but about who they are as people. This shift isn't a whim, it's a necessary evolution. If we don't take this step now, we risk being left behind. The room was silent again, but this time, it was different. The skeptical faces in the room seemed to soften, some even looking thoughtful. It wasn't a victory yet, but it was progress. Mark didn't say anything further, but his eyes narrowed slightly as he sat back in his chair. Lily felt her confidence rise, but it was still fragile. She knew this wasn't the end of the battle. In fact, it was only the beginning. After the meeting, Jason pulled her aside. That was a strong response, he said, his tone approving. But I want you to know, this won't be easy. Mark's not the only one who'll challenge you. There will be more people who doubt your vision. They'll try to find cracks in your ideas. You'll have to stay one step ahead of them, Lily. This is your fight now. Lily nodded, absorbing his words. She had expected it, this was no fairy tale journey. She would have to fight for every inch of progress. But she was ready. In the following days, the pressure only intensified. More meetings, more pushback. Mark continued to undermine her ideas, and others in the company began to echo his concerns. It seemed like every time she took one step forward, someone else was there to drag her 2 steps back. It was exhausting. But amidst the constant barrage of criticism, Lily began to notice something else. The team she had built, those loyal to her vision, were starting to rally around her more than ever. They worked late into the nights, refining strategies, brainstorming new ways to communicate the emotional aspect of the brand. They were tired too, but they were united by the belief that Lily's vision could succeed. One evening, as Lily sat alone in her office, the weight of the day's struggles crashing down on her, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Jason. I believe in you, Lily. But you need to start believing in yourself. Keep pushing. You're closer than you think. Her heart lifted at his words. He was right. She couldn't afford to doubt herself now, not when she had come so far. She took a deep breath and stood up from her desk, walking over to the whiteboard where the vision she had sketched out weeks ago was still there, a reminder of the dream she was fighting for. As she stared at the lines and notes that had once felt like mere ideas, they began to take on new meaning. This wasn't just a proposal. It was the foundation of something bigger, a movement. She wasn't just changing the airline. She was changing how people saw what it meant to fly. To travel, not just from one destination to another, but to feel a part of something, something that would stay with them long after their flight had ended. Her resolve hardened, and she knew in that moment that she wasn't going to let anyone stop her. She had a vision, and no matter how many obstacles lay in her path, she would fight for it. She would fight for the future she believed in. The road ahead was still uncertain, but Lily had made her choice. She wasn't backing down now. No matter what. The days blurred into one another, a series of endless meetings, late nights, and tense confrontations. Lily could feel herself being pulled in every direction, the pressure of keeping the vision alive bearing down on her shoulders. Yet, through it all, she could sense the company starting to shift, even if it was only a small, subtle change. There were moments, flickers of hope, where people started to come around, where they saw the possibility of what she was trying to create. But the forces working against her were just as powerful, if not more. The resistance within the company was growing stronger. It wasn't just Mark anymore, his allies had emerged from the shadows, questioning her every decision, dismissing her ideas as impractical. They made no secret of their disdain for her approach. The whispers in the hallways had turned into full-blown discussions, and they were loud. One afternoon, after an especially grueling meeting with the finance team, Lily was walking back to her office when she overheard a conversation that stopped her in her tracks. "I give it 2 more weeks before she quits," Mark's voice carried through the hallway, sharp and dismissive. "She has no idea what she's up against. You can't change a company like this just by making it feel good. The bottom line is all that matters." Lily's heart sank. She knew the opposition was fierce, but hearing Mark's words spoken so openly, so confidently, felt like a blow to her gut. She had poured everything into this project, sacrificed so much, and yet it felt like it was all unraveling before her eyes. But she didn't have the luxury of falling apart, not now. She straightened her posture, took a deep breath, and walked the rest of the way to her office with purpose. The storm was getting stronger, but she wasn't going to let it break her. Inside her office, she sat down at her desk, her hands resting on the cold surface. She stared at the vision board she had created months ago, filled with post-it notes and scribbled ideas. The dream was still there, just as alive as it had been on the first day she conceived it. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the weight of it all settle in. This was the hard part, the part where most people gave up. She had no illusions about how difficult this was going to be. But she also knew that if she didn't push through now, if she didn't see this fight to its bitter end, she would never forgive herself. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Lily, do you have a minute?" It was Jason, looking calm as ever, though there was an unspoken tension in his eyes. "Of course," she said, trying to sound more composed than she felt. Jason stepped inside and closed the door behind him. He walked over to her desk, his eyes scanning the room, before settling on her. "How are you holding up?" Lily couldn't help but laugh, though it was a hollow sound. "How do you think I'm holding up?" He gave her a small smile but didn't comment on it. "You've been under a lot of pressure. I know it's tough. But I've been thinking about what's next. We need to stop reacting to the opposition and start putting forward a more aggressive push." Lily raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Jason leaned in slightly, his voice lowering. "It's time to take control of the narrative. Stop letting Mark and his team define the conversation. Show them, show everyone, that this isn't just a dream. It's a necessity. We need to act like we already own the future we're building. Lead with confidence, with authority." Lily's mind raced. Jason was right. She had been playing defense, responding to their criticisms and doubts. But it was time to stop waiting for permission to succeed. It was time to take the reins. She needed to be more than just the underdog. She needed to become the force that couldn't be ignored. "I think I know what you mean," she said, her voice gaining confidence as the words took shape. "But I can't do it alone. I need the support of the leadership team." Jason nodded. "You've already got a core group. Start with them. Rally the people who believe in the vision. Make them your allies, and together, you'll be unstoppable. It's time to play offense." Lily felt a spark ignite within her. This was the push she needed. She had been trying to convince the skeptics, but now she realized it wasn't about convincing everyone. It was about surrounding herself with those who understood the bigger picture and could help her lead the charge. "You're right," Lily said firmly, her voice steady now. "I've been trying to win over everyone, but I need to focus on the people who are ready to fight with me." Jason smiled. "Exactly. You're going to get through this, Lily. You just have to stay true to what you believe in." As Jason left her office, Lily felt a renewed sense of determination. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to happen overnight. But she was no longer afraid of the fight. If anything, the opposition was only fueling her drive to prove them wrong. Over the next week, Lily worked tirelessly with her inner circle. She began reaching out to the key leaders within the company who had shown support for her vision, organizing meetings and strategy sessions where they could brainstorm, fine-tune the plan, and prepare to take action. She pushed them harder than ever before, knowing that this was her only chance to prove that she wasn't just another dreamer. She was a leader, and she was going to make this work. Mark's influence continued to loom large, but Lily no longer let it intimidate her. She was done playing small, done second-guessing her every move. She had a vision, and she was going to make it a reality, no matter how many obstacles were placed in her path. Then came the pivotal moment, the one that would either make or break her. Lily was invited to present her final proposal to the entire executive board. This was the moment of truth. No more second chances. This was the fight for the future of the company, and everything depended on how well she could execute her pitch. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she had no choice but to go all in. The stakes were higher than ever. If she could convince them now, if she could make them believe in the vision as she did, then they would finally have the momentum they needed. If not, she would be forced to walk away from everything she had fought for. Lily had made her choice. She was going to give everything she had. The room was silent as Lily stood at the front, her notes neatly arranged in front of her, but her mind racing. The weight of the moment was suffocating, and she could feel the eyes of the entire executive board on her, each one a silent judge, waiting for her to make her case. This was it, the moment where everything would either fall into place or crumble apart. Mark sat near the back of the room, his arms crossed, his expression one of quiet skepticism. Lily had spent days preparing for this presentation, refining every detail of her vision, making sure that every argument was sharp, every number meticulously backed by research. But she knew it wouldn't be the data that swayed them, it would be her belief, her conviction, her ability to make them feel the same passion she felt for the future she wanted to build. "Good afternoon, everyone," Lily began, her voice steady but carrying the weight of everything she had been through. "I know we've all been through a lot in the past few weeks, and I understand the skepticism. The risk is high. But that's exactly why we need to do this. If we don't act now, we risk being left behind. The world is changing, and so must we." She paused, making eye contact with each member of the board. They were all listening now, some more intently than others, but she could tell that a few were starting to soften. This was her chance. She was no longer speaking to them as a mere employee, she was speaking to them as a leader with a vision. Loyalty isn't just about what we offer, it's about what we stand for. It's about creating a connection with our customers that goes beyond just a transaction. It's about making them feel seen, heard, and valued. If we want to lead the industry, we need to build an emotional bond, something that people can't replicate, no matter how many rewards points they offer. Mark shifted in his seat, and Lily could feel his eyes on her, piercing and critical. But she didn't flinch. This wasn't about him, it was about what she knew was right. "I know some of you have concerns," Lily continued, her voice gaining strength. "That this is too risky, that it's too big of a departure from what we've done before. But I'm asking you to look at the bigger picture. The future of this company isn't just about following the status quo. It's about daring to do something different. It's about creating a legacy, not just profits." A murmur of agreement spread through the room, but Mark's voice cut through it. "But how do we know this will work?" he asked, his tone skeptical. "How do we know this is more than just a pipe dream? What's the proof?" Lily met his challenge head-on. "The proof is in the people we've already reached, the customers who have already responded to the initial changes we've made. The increase in customer satisfaction, the positive feedback, the stories of loyalty that we've heard time and time again. People don't just want a product or a service, they want an experience. And that's what we're offering." There was a brief silence as the board members took in her words. Lily could see that some of them were beginning to nod, slowly but surely. But the battle wasn't over yet. "We have the data, we have the customer support, and we have the vision," she said, her eyes scanning the room. "Now, we just need the courage to act on it. We need to take a leap of faith and trust that this is the future. I believe in this company. I believe in all of you. And most importantly, I believe in the power of what we're trying to build here." The room was still, and for a moment, it felt like the entire world had paused. Lily's heart was in her throat, the fear of failure creeping in, but she refused to let it take hold. This was her shot. She had come too far to back down now. Then, to her surprise, Jason, who had been sitting quietly at the back of the room, stood up. His eyes were steady, his expression calm but determined. He locked eyes with Lily, giving her a small nod of approval before turning to the board. "I've seen firsthand what Lily can do," Jason said, his voice carrying a weight of authority. "And I've seen the vision she has for this company. It's bold, it's daring, and it's what we need. We can't afford to play it safe anymore. If we want to be leaders, we need to act like leaders." The room shifted, and for the first time, the board members were looking at each other, murmuring softly among themselves. The tide was turning. Mark, who had been silent for the past few moments, stood up. "I still have concerns," he said, his voice firm. "But I'm willing to listen. Let's take this proposal to the next level. Let's get a timeline, a plan, a clear strategy." Lily exhaled, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. It wasn't the full endorsement she had hoped for, but it was progress. Mark wasn't agreeing completely, but he was no longer dismissing her out of hand. That was a victory in itself. The meeting continued for another hour, as they discussed the logistics, the financials, the potential risks and rewards. It wasn't easy, and there were still many questions left unanswered. But by the end of it, Lily had a new sense of hope. She had gained a foothold, and she knew that, with time, she could prove the worth of her vision. As the meeting adjourned, Jason came up to her, his expression satisfied but still focused. "You did it," he said, offering her a congratulatory smile. "They're listening." Lily nodded, though she didn't feel victorious yet. "It's just the beginning," she said. "Now the real work starts." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The company began implementing parts of Lily's vision, slowly integrating the emotional loyalty framework into their marketing, customer service, and product development. There were still obstacles, still resistance from some corners of the organization, but the tide had finally begun to turn. The more success they had, the more people started to see that Lily was onto something. It wasn't just a dream, it was a new way of doing business. But it wasn't just the company that was changing. Lily herself was evolving too. She had faced the storm head-on, and now she stood taller, more confident in her role as a leader, ready to face whatever challenges came next. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time, Lily felt like she was on the path to something extraordinary. And no matter what lay ahead, she was determined to make sure that vision would become a reality. The months following the board meeting were a blur. The company's transformation had begun, and slowly but surely, Lily started to see the fruits of her labor. The initiatives she had proposed were being rolled out, and while the road was still bumpy, there was a tangible sense of progress. The once dismissive skepticism was now being replaced with cautious optimism, and though Mark and his allies still kept a close watch, there was a shift in the air. The future was no longer as uncertain as it had been before. Lily sat in her office late one evening, reviewing the latest customer feedback reports. There were mentions of increased satisfaction, customers praising the company's new approach to personal connections, and a noticeable uptick in loyalty. The vision was working, and it was happening faster than she had imagined. But still, she wasn't satisfied. There was more to be done. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from Jason. "Coffee tomorrow at 10. Need to talk." Lily smiled, feeling a sense of comfort in the simplicity of their routine. She had come to rely on Jason in ways she hadn't anticipated when they first started this journey together. He had become not just an ally, but a true partner. Someone who understood the stakes and the sacrifices she had made. The next morning, they met at a local cafe, a quiet spot tucked away in a corner of the city. Jason arrived first, his ever-present calm demeanor in stark contrast to the storm that had raged only a few months ago. He stood and waved as Lily walked in, offering her a smile that was more genuine than she had seen in a while. "Good morning, Lily," he said, pulling out a chair for her. "How's the battle going?" Lily sat down, stretching her legs beneath the table. "It's going," she said with a sigh. "The numbers are looking better, but I can't shake the feeling that there's still a long way to go. Every time I think we've made a breakthrough, there's another roadblock. I know we're on the right path, but the pressure never really lets up." Jason nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "That's the reality of leadership. It's never easy, never simple. But you've done something most people can't. You've moved the needle. And that matters." Lily leaned back in her chair, the weight of the last few months catching up with her. The late nights, the endless meetings, the constant fight to prove herself. It had been exhausting, emotionally draining. But Jason was right. Despite everything, she had made it through. "I don't know if I've ever really thanked you properly for sticking with me through all this," she said, her voice softer than usual. "I wouldn't have made it without your support. You've been the one constant when everything felt like it was falling apart." Jason smiled, his usual reserved expression softening. "I believed in the vision from the beginning. But more than that, I believed in you. You have something special, Lily. You've got the drive and the heart to do what others only dream of. And that's why I'm still here." The sincerity in his words warmed her. For a brief moment, the weight of the past months seemed lighter, and she allowed herself to enjoy the quiet comfort of this moment. For so long, the company had been her singular focus. But now, sitting across from Jason, she realized that she had built more than just a professional relationship, she had built a partnership, one that had changed the course of her journey. They chatted for a while longer, discussing future plans and how they could improve the company's internal culture to better align with their vision. But as they spoke, Lily couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. There had been moments when she wanted to quit, when the pressure had felt like it would crush her. But now, in the calm after the storm, she saw clearly how much she had grown, both as a leader and as a person. The conversation shifted to a lighter note, and they laughed about an old joke from their early days working together. But beneath the laughter, Lily knew that the challenges weren't over. The company still faced obstacles, and there were still plenty of people who didn't fully understand the changes she was trying to bring about. The work wasn't finished yet. But in that moment, she also knew something important: she wasn't alone anymore. She had the right people around her, people who believed in her vision, and in the future they were building together. The meeting ended, and as they left the cafe, Jason placed a hand on her shoulder. "Whatever happens next, you've already changed everything. Remember that." Lily smiled, feeling a renewed sense of clarity. "Thanks, Jason. I won't forget." As she walked back to her office, the weight of the past few months didn't seem quite as heavy. There was still so much to do, but she had already come further than she ever thought possible. It wasn't just about the company anymore, it was about the journey she had taken, the growth she had experienced, and the person she was becoming. And that, in itself, was enough to keep her going. The next few weeks passed in a blur of meetings, presentations, and late-night work sessions. But with each passing day, Lily found herself more certain of the path she was on. There were still those who doubted her, still resistance from some corners of the company, but she was no longer afraid of them. She had faced the storm and emerged stronger. One afternoon, as Lily walked through the office, she noticed something that made her pause. A team member, a young woman from the marketing department, was sitting at her desk, staring at her computer screen with an expression of quiet determination. The same determination Lily had seen in herself months ago. Lily walked over, placing a hand on her shoulder. "How's everything going?" she asked. The woman looked up, a slight smile on her face. "Actually, it's going great. We've made some major improvements in our customer engagement strategy, and I think we're really onto something. I've been following your lead, and I'm starting to see what you meant about building something bigger than just sales." Lily's heart swelled with pride. "That's exactly it. Keep pushing. The future's in your hands now." As she walked away, she realized that this was the real victory. It wasn't the numbers, the meetings, or the power struggles that mattered most, it was the impact she was having on the people around her. She had ignited a spark, and now, that spark was spreading. Lily knew there was still much to do, but for the first time, she felt like she could breathe. The future was hers for the taking, and she was ready to embrace whatever came next. Lily stood in the corner of her office, gazing out of the large glass window that overlooked the bustling city. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden hue over the skyline. It had been an intense few months, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace. The road ahead was still uncertain, but the foundation was strong. The changes she had fought for were beginning to take root. As she turned back toward her desk, her phone buzzed again. It was a message from Mark. "We need to talk. Can you meet tomorrow at noon?" Lily hesitated. Mark had always been a figure she respected, but his skepticism toward her vision had been a constant challenge. His approval had been the final piece she needed to solidify her place in the company. Now that things were moving in the right direction, she wondered if this meeting was about acknowledging her success, or if he was still holding back, waiting for more. She replied with a simple, "Of course. See you then." The next day, Lily arrived at the cafe where she and Mark had agreed to meet. It was a quiet, neutral space, one where they had both come for many of their early, tense discussions. Mark was already there, sitting at a corner table with his usual no-nonsense posture. His eyes met hers as she walked in, and there was something different in his expression this time, less of the critical judgment, more of a begrudging respect. "Lily," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "I've been thinking about what you've done here. About the direction you've taken the company." Lily sat down, her pulse quickening. "And?" Mark sighed, a hint of a smile creeping onto his face. "I was wrong." Lily blinked, surprised. "Wrong?" "Yes," he said, his voice softening. "I didn't understand it at first. I thought you were pushing too hard, too fast. But, the numbers don't lie. The feedback from the customers, the growth in loyalty, the positive changes, it's working. You were right." Lily felt a wave of relief wash over her, but she kept her composure. This was the moment she had worked for, but she had learned not to get too comfortable. "Thank you, Mark," she said, her voice steady but sincere. "It's been a long road. But we're not done yet. There's still a lot more to build." Mark nodded. "I agree. I'm not saying it's all smooth sailing from here. There will still be challenges ahead, and I'll be honest, some of the changes are still difficult for me to fully get behind. But I'm willing to support you, Lily. I see where this is going, and I think I've underestimated you." Lily smiled, though she couldn't help but feel a little more than just a sense of victory. This was validation. Not from her peers, not from her employees, but from the very man who had once doubted her, the one who had stood as a barrier between her and her ambitions. She had earned his respect, and in doing so, she had solidified her place in the company. "Thank you," she said again, her voice full of gratitude. "That means more than you know." The rest of their conversation was more casual, with Mark offering some insights into potential areas for improvement and expressing a desire to work together moving forward. There was no longer an adversarial tone between them. It was clear that both had changed, and the meeting was a turning point for their professional relationship. As they finished their coffee and prepared to leave, Mark stood up and clapped Lily on the shoulder. "You've got this," he said, and for the first time, Lily believed him. The following weeks saw the continued expansion of Lily's vision. The customer engagement strategies were working better than anticipated, with new programs in place to build deeper relationships with their clients. The loyalty framework was becoming a defining aspect of the company's brand, and Lily's leadership was recognized not just by her team but by others in the industry. She had become a symbol of transformation, proof that innovation could succeed even in the most entrenched of environments. But even with this newfound success, Lily knew that there was more to be done. She couldn't allow herself to rest on her laurels. There were still challenges on the horizon, and the world was changing fast. The future wasn't guaranteed, and she wasn't about to let the momentum slip away. She spent hours analyzing data, meeting with teams, and strategizing for the next phase of the company's growth. Each day brought something new, a fresh insight, a new breakthrough, a new obstacle to overcome. She relished it. This was the life she had worked so hard to create, and she wasn't about to let anything derail it. One afternoon, as she was leaving the office, she received a call from Jason. "Lily, I think we need to talk about the next phase of our project. There's something I want to discuss with you, something that's been on my mind." She agreed to meet him at a nearby restaurant later that evening. When they sat down, Jason wasted no time getting to the point. "Lily, I've been thinking a lot about the future of this company, and I think we need to start thinking bigger. There's potential here for something beyond just the industry we're in right now. We have the resources, the talent, and the vision to create a legacy. But we need to be bold." Lily raised an eyebrow. "What exactly do you mean by that?" Jason leaned in, his voice low but filled with excitement. "What if we could take this concept of customer loyalty and build an entirely new market around it? What if we could partner with other industries, retail, travel, hospitality, to create a universal loyalty system, something that goes beyond just one company's rewards program? I think it could revolutionize the way businesses and customers interact." Lily sat back, processing his words. The idea was big, ambitious, and exciting. It was the kind of vision that she had always dreamed of, one that would change the landscape of business forever. But it was also risky, potentially far riskier than anything she had done before. "That's a huge leap," she said, her voice filled with both excitement and caution. "But I like it. It could be the next level of everything we've been working on. Let's start exploring the possibilities." As they continued to discuss the idea, Lily felt a surge of energy. She had faced so much doubt in the past, so much uncertainty. But now, she was looking ahead, seeing the possibility of something even greater. The company was on the right track, but there was more to be done. The road ahead was filled with opportunities, and Lily was ready to seize them. Lily spent the following weeks immersed in brainstorming sessions, strategy meetings, and late-night planning. Jason's idea had taken root in her mind, growing stronger with each passing day. The more she thought about it, the more she realized how much potential it had, not just for the company, but for an entire industry. It could be the breakthrough that set them apart from their competitors, and maybe even revolutionized the way businesses and customers interacted. But like everything in business, it came with risks. By now, Lily had learned to make decisions based not on fear, but on a calculated sense of possibility. This new venture wasn't without its uncertainties, but she knew that if she didn't take this chance, she would regret it. She had already achieved success in ways she never thought possible, but now, it was time for something bigger. She called a meeting with her core leadership team, including Jason, Mark, and a few trusted advisors. They gathered in the large conference room, the same room where she had presented her vision for the company months ago. This time, the mood was different. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, as though they all knew that something big was about to happen. Lily stood at the front of the room, the weight of her decision heavy on her shoulders. She had spent days putting together projections, plans, and a vision for what this new venture could look like. It wasn't just about expanding their current business, it was about creating an entirely new ecosystem, a platform that could integrate multiple industries, uniting them under the banner of customer loyalty. "Everyone, thank you for coming together on such short notice," Lily began, her voice steady. "We've been working hard to build something great here, and we've made significant progress. But I believe it's time for us to take a bold step forward." She paused, letting the words sink in before continuing. "I'm proposing that we build a universal loyalty platform. One that spans multiple industries, retail, travel, hospitality, entertainment, basically, any industry that values customer loyalty. This would be an integrated system where customers can earn rewards across various companies and redeem them seamlessly, all under one umbrella. It's ambitious, yes, but I truly believe this could change the way people interact with businesses forever." Jason leaned forward, a spark in his eyes. "I've been thinking about this too. We've already built a solid foundation, and this could be the next logical step for us. It would not only strengthen our brand but position us as pioneers in an untapped market. But we're going to need the support of major players across different sectors." Lily nodded. "Exactly. We'll need to partner with companies in multiple industries, but the possibilities are limitless. If we can pull this off, we could dominate the customer loyalty space and reshape how brands engage with their audiences." There was a brief silence as the team absorbed the proposal. Mark, who had been skeptical of some of Lily's ideas in the past, spoke up. "I won't lie, this is a huge leap. But I've seen the way you work, Lily. You've always had the ability to turn vision into reality. I think we have a shot at making this work. We'll need to work fast and be strategic, but if we align with the right partners, this could really take off." Lily smiled, grateful for his support. "Thank you, Mark. I know it's a big risk, but I believe in this team. We've proven that we can take on challenges and succeed, and this is no different." The team began to discuss logistics, brainstorming potential partners and outlining next steps. There was a sense of excitement in the room as the plan began to take shape. It was a long shot, but if they could pull it off, it would change everything. After the meeting, Lily sat at her desk, her mind buzzing with possibilities. She had already prepared a list of potential companies to approach, but there was still a part of her that hesitated. It was one thing to take risks within the confines of a single industry, it was another to branch out and ask others to join them on this untested journey. But deep down, she knew there was no turning back. She had made it this far by pushing boundaries, and now was the time to push even further. She called Jason, her voice filled with determination. "Let's start making the calls. I'm ready to take this leap." Over the next few weeks, the team worked tirelessly to build the framework for their new loyalty platform. They approached potential partners, pitching the idea with passion and conviction. Some were hesitant, unsure of how such a system would work or how it would benefit them. Others saw the potential right away and jumped at the opportunity to be part of something revolutionary. Lily had learned a lot about negotiation over the years, and now, she used every ounce of that knowledge to sell the idea. She wasn't just asking for partnerships, she was asking these companies to trust her, to invest in a vision that wasn't fully realized yet. It was risky, but it was the only way forward. Jason worked alongside her, handling the technical aspects of the platform's development. Mark, who had once been a staunch critic of Lily's approach, became one of her biggest allies, helping to secure some of the initial agreements with key players in the retail and travel industries. After weeks of hard work and countless meetings, they finally had the green light from several major companies. The partnerships were in place. The vision was becoming a reality. Lily stood in the middle of the office, looking around at her team. "We've done it," she said, her voice filled with awe. "This is only the beginning." The official launch of the loyalty platform was set for the following quarter. The excitement within the company was palpable, but Lily knew they had to remain focused. The launch would be the true test of everything they had worked for. She wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was certain, she was ready to face it head-on. In the quiet moments before the launch, Lily took a deep breath and allowed herself to reflect on everything she had accomplished. She had started as the underdog, underestimated by many, fighting against the odds to change the course of the company. And now, she was on the brink of changing an entire industry. The journey had been long, filled with setbacks and challenges, but it had also been incredibly rewarding. She had found not just professional success, but a sense of purpose, a sense of belief in herself that she had never had before. As the launch day approached, Lily stood by the window once more, looking out at the city. The horizon was still far off, but now, it felt closer than ever. She had taken the leap, and there was no turning back. The future was hers for the taking. And she was ready to embrace it. The day of the launch had arrived. The energy in the office was palpable, everyone bustling with excitement as final preparations were made for the unveiling of their ambitious universal loyalty platform. Phones rang incessantly, emails flooded in, and the atmosphere was a combination of anticipation and nervous energy. But for Lily, as she stood in her office looking out at the city skyline, it felt almost surreal. She had spent months building up to this moment, each step pushing her closer to her vision. And now, it was happening. It was early morning, and the team was in full swing. Lily had arrived hours before the official start time, her mind racing with thoughts of what could go wrong, what could go right, and what this moment meant for not only her, but for everyone who had been a part of the journey. There was no turning back now. She took a deep breath and turned to her phone. There was a message from Jason. "Ready for this? The platform is live in an hour. Let's make it count." Lily smiled. The team had worked tirelessly, and she knew that the hard part was over. Now, all they had to do was deliver. She quickly responded, "Let's do this. We've got this." At exactly 10 a.m., the press releases went live. Emails were sent to partners, influencers, and industry leaders. Social media was abuzz with excitement, as the official announcement went out across all channels. The Universal Loyalty Platform was officially up and running, marking the beginning of what Lily hoped would be a game-changing revolution. It wasn't long before the first wave of customer feedback started pouring in. At first, it was a trickle, a few positive comments, a couple of questions about how the system worked. But then, it started to snowball. People were impressed. Customers who had been skeptical at first were now sending messages praising the platform's ease of use and the seamless integration across different brands. The media outlets picked up on the buzz, publishing articles about the innovative approach Lily's company had taken. It was all happening, the dream was becoming a reality. By midday, the platform had already seen more sign-ups than they had anticipated. The partnership with the retail, travel, and hospitality sectors was proving to be a strong selling point, as customers were eager to earn rewards from multiple industries with just one membership. It was clear that they had tapped into a market that was hungry for something fresh. Lily sat at her desk, her mind reeling with the possibilities. She glanced over at her team, who were monitoring the activity on their computers. Jason was focused, tracking the platform's performance in real time. Mark was on a call, securing even more partnerships. There was a quiet sense of pride in the air, but the work was far from over. Later that evening, Lily attended a celebratory dinner with her core team and their partners. It was a small gathering, but the mood was euphoric. The wine flowed, and the team toasted to the success of the launch. Jason raised his glass. To Lily, without her vision and leadership, none of this would have been possible. Lily smiled, humbled. This was a team effort. Every single one of you played a part in making this happen. Let's not forget that. As the night drew to a close and the team said their goodbyes, Lily found herself standing outside the restaurant, looking up at the stars. There was a stillness to the night that mirrored the calm she was feeling inside. She had reached the pinnacle of her career so far, but this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The customer base for the loyalty platform continued to grow exponentially, and more companies were lining up to join the network. Lily's company had become a force to be reckoned with in the business world. Investors took notice, and media outlets were calling her for interviews, eager to know more about her vision and the future of the platform. She was becoming a thought leader in the industry, and her name was starting to carry weight in circles she had once only dreamed of. But with success came pressure. The demands were greater, the stakes higher. Lily found herself constantly balancing the growth of the company with the delicate management of its culture. She knew that she couldn't afford to lose sight of the core values that had brought them to this point. There were still challenges to navigate, competing technologies, potential market disruptions, and the ever-present threat of complacency. But as she faced these challenges, Lily was no longer the unsure woman who had first stepped into the CEO role. She was confident in her abilities, steadfast in her vision, and ready to tackle whatever came next. One afternoon, she sat down with Mark and Jason to discuss the next steps. "We've done well so far," Mark said, "but we can't rest on our laurels. We need to think about expanding into new markets, reaching customers globally." Jason nodded. "We're already seeing interest from international brands. If we can position ourselves in the right regions, we could double our growth within the next year." Lily looked at her two closest allies, her team who had been with her through every obstacle. "I agree," she said. "But we have to keep our focus. The world is watching us now. We need to be strategic, not just fast. Let's make sure we're ready for the next phase." Months passed, and Lily's company continued to grow. The universal loyalty platform had become a cornerstone of the business world, and Lily was now a respected leader in her field. But despite the success, she remained grounded. She had learned the value of perseverance, of believing in herself and her vision, even when the odds were stacked against her. In a rare moment of solitude, Lily found herself reflecting on how far she had come. She had been through so much, the doubts, the struggles, the setbacks, but here she was, standing on the precipice of something even greater. The future was still uncertain, but one thing was for sure, Lily was ready for whatever came next. Her journey was far from over, but she had already shown the world that anything was possible with the right combination of vision, determination, and the courage to take the leap. The horizon was wide open, and Lily was more than ready to chase it. As she stood by the window, looking out over the city once more, she allowed herself to smile. This was just the beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?